So good morning, all of you. As we
Good
know,
morning.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning,
morning,
Miss.
Miss.
as
Miss.
good morning. As you know, today we have a session that is of students only. Already we have completed the chapter, and we know about the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and autonomic nervous system. But in your syllabus, only you have to describe the central nervous system. So those portions are assigned to the students, you know it better. So one by one you can start, you can continue. I will not interfere in between if it is not required. Okay, and after completion of all the topic, then it is open for the other students, they can ask questions. If anyone cannot answer, any of you cannot answer, then I will interfere, I will answer. So we will begin now. Subhadra, you can start.
Okay, Miss. Miss, am I visible?
Yes, you are visible.
Okay. So, hello viewers, welcome back. Myself Subhadra Roshan of class 8th D, and today we are going to discuss about the brain. So, brain is a part of the central nervous system. So, before discussing about the brain, let's see what the nervous system is divided into. What are its parts? So, the nervous system is divided into three parts: the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord; the peripheral nervous system, the second, that contains the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves; and the third is the autonomic nervous system, which contains the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So, now we are going to discuss about the brain. So brain is a highly developed organ, or we can say it's the controlling center of our body, because each and every action that takes place in our body is controlled by the brain itself. So as the brain is a very sensitive organ, it requires some protection, some security. So for that we have the cranium, or the hard bony box, which protects the brain against any shocks. So the cranium is made up of 8 cranial nerves bound together, and after the cranium is there, we cannot just put the brain in the cranium. We require a membranous covering, because the brain is very soft. So for that we have the meninges. So meninges are the membranous covering of the brain. So we have 3 layers of meninges for the brain. The outer is the outer tough dura mater, middle thin arachnoid, and the inner soft pia mater. And there's a fluid present in between these meninges, that is called the cerebrospinal fluid. It is an ultrafiltrate of plasma, and it has low protein content. And these meninges and cerebrospinal fluid protects the brain against any mechanical and physical shocks. So the brain alone covers 98% of the whole nervous system, and it varies from person to person. The weight of the brain is 1,200 to 1,400 grams. And also sometimes there's an inflammation in the meninges of the brain, which leads to a fatal disease that is called the meningitis. So it's really fatal. It requires an immediate seeking help from the doctor. So now let's see what are the functions of the brain, what the brain does actually. So the brain receives the information from the sensory organs, or the receptors, by the sensory nerves, and generates an appropriate response for it, and transmits it to the effector organs by the motor nerves. And the second function is it is a site of intelligence, reasoning, and whatever is done by the whatever we think is done by the brain itself. And there's a study which deals with the study of brain, that is called the encephalogy. That's why the traffic police says us to wear helmet, because the brain is very sensitive. If anything happens to the brain, it will affect our whole body. So that's why we require some protection of the brain. So after all, you may be thinking, well, what supplies the oxygen and nutrients to the brain? So that is done by the inner soft pia mater and the middle thin arachnoid. They do this process of supplying nutrients and oxygen to the brain with the help of cerebrospinal fluid. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anyone wants to ask any question to Subhadra regarding this introductory part of the brain? Shall I ask you one question, Subhadra?
Yes, miss.
Yes, miss.
You said about the bony covering of the brain. It is known as cranium.
Yes.
What is it made up of, this bony covering?
Miss, skull bones.
Skull bones. Okay, can you say the type of joint in the skull bone? Is it
Miss, immovable joint.
very good? Bones are immovable. That is the best example of immovable joint. Okay,
Yes, miss.
okay. Anyone else? If there is no other question, we can move to the next part. Is Abhijit present?
Yes, miss.
Okay, you can start.
Miss, am I visible?
Yes, you are visible.
Okay, miss. Good morning to one and all. Today, I am going to explain about the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest and most complex part of the brain. It constitutes about 80% of the brain and is located in the forebrain. The surface of cerebrum has many folds and ridges. The folds or ridges are called as gyri, while the depressions or grooves are called as sulci. Both the gyri and sulci increase the surface area of the cerebrum in order to accommodate more nerve cells in the cerebrum. The cerebrum is divided into two equal halves, namely right and left cerebral hemisphere. Both the cerebral hemispheres are joined by a thick band of nervous tissues, which is known as corpus callosum. It helps in the passage of signals or nerve impulse from one cerebral hemisphere to the other. Or we can say that it acts as a medium for transfer of information between the cerebral hemispheres. The cavity of cerebrum is known as ventricles and is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. The cerebral hemisphere is divided into two parts. The outer part is known as cerebral cortex, while the inner part is known as cerebral medulla. The cerebral cortex is made up of gray matter, while the cerebral medulla is made up of the white matter. Gray matter, Gray matter appears gray due to the presence of unmyelinated axons and Nissel's granules, and it is made up of the cytons of the neurons, while the white matter is made up of the axons of the neurons and appears white due to the presence of myelin sheath. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anyone else want to ask any question regarding cerebrum?
Miss, what transfers the impulses from the cerebral cortex to cerebral medulla?
One part of
The
the.
nervous tissues.
Okay, what type of nervous tissue?
Multipolar.
Multipolar means you are saying about the neuron. Because when we say about the tissue,
Yes, miss.
tissue means it's the aggregation of the cell together. Those cells are working together that form the tissue. So in case of nervous tissue, you know the neuroglia cells are called the that form neuroglia cells along with the neurons. They form the nervous tissue, that is called as neural tissue. So passage of nerve impulse, or we can say the transmission of nerve impulse from one part of the body to the other part of the body, or from one part of the brain to the other part of the brain, which occurs through the neurons only. That means through the different with the help of different structures. So in case of cerebrum, so the cerebral hemispheres are communicated through the corpus callosum, so which helps in transmission of nerve impulse from one part to the other part, from left cerebral hemisphere to the right cerebral hemisphere.
Okay, miss.
Miss, now I will say,
Yes, can start.
Miss, am I visible?
Yes, you are visible.
So, as we all know that cerebrum is the largest and the complex part of our brain. So now let's discuss about its functions. So its functions are, first, it helps to absorb things around us to sensory organs. Second, it controls thinking, memorizing, reasoning, and intelligence. Third, it controls vision, hearing, mood, emotions, and space. That's it. Thank you.
Any other question regarding the functions of cerebrum? Voluntary actions are controlled by the cerebrum. Can you say one example of any voluntary action? Any voluntary action in human body?
Movement of the limbs.
Movement of the limbs. Okay, we can say
Miss
movement.
walking.
Walking. Okay, fine. Anything else? Any other example?
Miss running.
Movement, walking, running. Okay, these are means locomotion from one part to other part. Leaving this locomotion, any other thing that you can say voluntarily which is controlled by the cerebrum? Voluntary actions means it is controlled by the voluntary muscles, and the voluntary muscles are regulated by the cerebrum. So leaving locomotion, do you find anything else, any other action of the body that is controlled by the cerebrum? We can say that also voluntary movement or voluntary action.
Miss speaking.
Speaking, very good. Speaking also. Can you say which
Miss
muscles
speaking.
are working in case of speaking? Which muscles are working?
Jawbones.
Yes, jawbone supported by the muscles. That is working. Upper jaw, lower jaw are supported by the muscles. Okay, fine. So if there is no other doubt, then we can move to the next part.
Yes, miss. Miss, am I visible?
Yes, Arshita, you are visible.
Okay. So the brain is divided into three parts, namely cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. And now let's learn about cerebellum. The cerebellum is a region lying at the back of your head under the cerebrum. It is the second largest part of your brain. It is also known as the little brain. The cerebellum coordinates the impulses sent out from the cerebrum. Now let's learn its functions. So its functions are: it controls the posture and balance of the body. It also coordinates the muscles during locomotion. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, children, any other doubt related to cerebellum? As you know, it is the second largest. And why is it called little brain? Cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, but cerebellum is called the little brain. Why is it called little brain?
Because it controls the involuntary movements.
Cerebellum is controlling involuntary movements, or medulla oblongata is controlling
No, no.
involuntary?
Miss
Because
it
many
controls
similar
posture and
cells.
Because most of its functions are similar.
Which functions are similar?
It controls the voluntary movements.
One thing is mentioned in your textbook about the number of neurons, those constitute the cerebellum. Are these more or less number? Have you gone through the textbook? It is mentioned about the number of neurons. Last year you have studied about it, about the number of neurons. So it contains more number of neurons, and it performs a most important function, that is posture, maintaining the posture of the body. So that is the difference between a quadruped and a biped. Quadruped means the animals, those are using the four limbs for movement. But what about the biped? Bipeds, bipedals, that means human beings, they are using only the hind limbs for locomotion. So this difference between using the four limbs and using two limbs, there is a transition period, and that is controlled by the cerebellum. So already we have studied about the functions. One thing is it is controlling the posture, and second thing coordinates the muscular activities. Which muscular activities? Are these involuntary muscles or voluntary muscles?
Voluntary.
Voluntary muscles. Already
Miss
we have,
voluntary.
okay, already we have studied
For
in,
locomotion.
okay, already we have studied that the cerebrum, it controls the voluntary movements, voluntary activities.
Yes.
Okay, are they
Yes,
related?
miss.
Cerebrum and cerebellum, are they related, or cerebellum performs work independently?
Related?
They
Related?
they are
They
related.
coordinate.
Coordinates, it
Why?
coordinates,
Yes.
Yeah.
but after getting the instruction from the cerebrum only it can coordinate. Without getting instruction from the cerebellum cannot function. So coordination is under
Means
the
it is
control of cerebrum.
Miss cerebellum can't do anything without the means coordination of cerebrum.
No, without getting the instruction cerebellum cannot coordinate. Alone it is not enough,
Why?
because cerebrum is the main part of the brain. Is we know that the brain is the most important part of the nervous system. Like that cerebrum is the most important part because it will do the work of memorizing, reasoning, all the academic activities. So it is the soul of the brain, so it will give the instruction, then only the cerebellum can perform these functions efficiently. Let us take one
Okay,
example.
miss.
Okay, let us take one example. uh, if I will instruct you to bring your notebook, will you bring or not?
Yes,
yes,
miss.
miss.
Yes.
Okay, I will tell you to write down something in the notebook what I will dictate. You will do that?
Yes,
Yes.
miss.
Yes, miss.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
miss.
Yes, miss.
Now take it as
Yes,
an
miss.
example. Take it an example and say what is the work of cerebrum and cerebellum here.
Cerebrum is thinking and processing and telling the cerebellum to means such that it
Yes,
will
miss.
coordinate
Cerebrum
the
is
muscle
giving
to do this.
instruction to cerebellum.
Move the hands, limbs of the hands.
Yes,
This is
miss.
controlled by
To
cerebellum
bring.
I have
and
given the
Yeah,
thinking
miss.
whether to
instruction.
do or not.
Okay, I have given the instruction. It is received by the receptors,
Cere-
isn't it? It is
yes,
received by
here.
the
Receptor.
receptors, by the ear, and that is now perceived by the brain. So which part of the brain? Now the cerebrum of the brain
Cerebrum.
receive that. Okay, the
Cerebrum.
process, it processes the information, and the information is now sent to means how did you go to get the notebook? You left your place, you went to your bookshelf, you brought the notebook. That means the muscles are working here, the muscles of the limb, hind limb, muscles of the forelimb are working. These are controlled, these are coordinated by the cerebellum. But unless the instruction is sent by the cerebrum, how the muscles would coordinate? Do you understand the relationship between cerebrum and cerebellum? Is it clear?
Yes, miss.
Yes, miss.
Okay, then we will move to the next part.
Yes, yes, miss. Medulla oblongata. Extending down from the center portion of the brain is the medulla oblongata. It is the posterior most part of the brain which continues with the spinal cord. The medulla oblongata is divided into two main parts, the ventral medulla and the dorsal medulla. Now, let's go to the functions of medulla oblongata. It controls involuntary responses such as breathing, heartbeat, and swallowing. Secretions of some glands are also controlled by medulla oblongata.
Nivedita, can you open your video? Can you speak? Can you put on the video?
Video. Okay,
Yes.
miss. It's visible.
Yes, you are visible. You were visible. Now you are not visible.
What is happening? Miss, now?
Yes, now you are visible. Something goes wrong.
Miss, my video is on. It is showing green only video.
Okay. Okay. Okay, children, any doubt?
Miss, now
Now also you are not visible. Any doubt regarding medulla oblongata? Involuntary activities means what type of activities?
Which are not controlled by our wish.
Which are not
Controlled by
controlled
us,
by us.
which we can control it.
Okay, these are not controlled by our wish. That means these are not controlled by the voluntary muscles.
yes, without willingness of an individual.
That means it is controlled by the involuntary muscles. So involuntary muscles,
Yes.
like we can say involuntary activity, as you said about heartbeat. Can we control the heartbeat?
No.
No,
No,
like
miss.
No,
breathe.
miss.
Circulation of blood,
No.
and we say it is controlled by medulla oblongata.
Yes, all the
Circulation of blood.
involuntary activities are controlled by the medulla oblongata. So this is all about the part of the brain.
Miss,
Brain.
one more doubt I have.
Yes.
One point was said that secretion of some glands are controlled by medulla oblongata.
Yes.
Miss, can you give some examples?
Secretion of gland. Suppose let us take the example of salivary gland. Location of salivary gland you can find in the buccal cavity, that opens in the buccal cavity. There are 3 pairs of salivary glands and they open in the mouth cavity, that is known as buccal cavity. Suppose you are taking food in your mouth, you are putting food in the mouth, immediately saliva will be secreted, otherwise digestion won't be possible. So that is not according to your wish. Okay, saliva, secretion of saliva is carried out by the salivary gland when there is food in the mouth cavity. No doubt without food also saliva is secreted to keep the mouth moistened, but when food is inserted in the mouth, then saliva secretion increases. So, so that the saliva which contains the enzyme, which enzyme it contains tyalin, salivary amylase. So that will act upon the food and that will initiate the process of digestion of carbohydrate. So this is a voluntary action or involuntary action? Secretion of saliva from the salivary gland. Is it voluntary?
Involuntary.
Involuntary.
Voluntary.
Okay.
Involuntary.
It is involuntary. It is clear now? We have taken the example of
Yes,
involuntary
miss, clear.
action of the
Yes,
glands.
Okay,
yes.
miss.
Like also the secretion of the TSH by the pituitary gland.
Secretion of tear by the tear gland, lacrimal gland.
Known as TSH, thyroid stimulating
TSH.
hormone.
TSH. If there is a requirement of the hormone thyroxine, that is controlled by TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, so these are the endocrine glands and the types of exocrine glands already you have studied. So secretion is based upon the requirement of the body. So we have completed the structure of the brain along with the function. Is there any doubt? Other those are present in the meet?
No,
Want to
miss.
ask anything? I hope in the exam you can attempt any type of question related to nervous system.
Yes, miss.
So those who have not drawn the diagram, it was already given in the assignment for the internal assessment. Draw the diagram of the spinal cord showing the reflex arc. Draw it properly and send it today itself by evening. Okay, I have received only from a few, and those who have not sent, please send it, because it is for internal assessment. So
The salivation is also an reflex action, no?
salivation we can say 2 types. Salivation we can say if you think about the food, if saliva is secreted in the mouth, then that is acquired reflex. Example of acquired reflex. But in case of a
Condition.
newborn baby, you might have seen salivation in the newborn baby. So that is
Yes, miss.
natural reflex. That is not acquired. If anything is learnt,
Miss, what is defecation?
I could not understand. I could not get your word.
Defecation meaning.
Defecation. Defecation means removal of the fecal matter from the body. That is called a defecation. Waste, waste substance after
It's
digestion.
like urination.
Urination is removal of urine. Defecation means removal of the fecal matter from the body. That is called defecation. All the waste substances have to be removed from the body through different openings, through different ways. These cannot be contained in the body because these are toxic. Okay, so you got an idea about salivation, how it is taken an example of natural reflex and also as an example of acquired reflex.
Miss, so it is an involuntary response, no?
Involuntary response when? In case of a
Miss,
newborn
reflex
baby.
actions are involuntary or voluntary?
Involuntary. Reflex actions are involuntary.
Voluntary. Miss, so involuntary
Sir,
actions are also controlled by medulla oblongata.
Yes, like heartbeat. Heartbeat is constantly heart is beating. So this work is to be done. Like breathing, there is a breathing center. So in the medulla oblongata, that breathing center will continuously work, non-stop it will work. So these functions are involuntary, but only for the protective mechanism. If any involuntary action is carried
spinal
out,
cord.
that is done by the spinal cord, and that is called as reflex action.
Because it needs to be processed very fast.
Yes, because for the protection of the body it is required immediate spontaneous action, that is to be taken, and that is called the reflex action.
Okay, miss, understood.
Okay, if there is no other doubt, we will close the class now. It is time already. Shall we close?
Okay, miss.
So next class you are having on Wednesday you are having class. So come prepare for the chapter ecosystem.
Okay, miss.
Okay, Miss.
Okay.
miss.
Okay.
Thank you, miss.
Thank you.
Thank you, miss.
Thank you.
Thank you, miss.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you. Thank you, miss.
Thank you, miss.